Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 898 of the Juicebox Podcast. I make little notes for myself after I edit the podcasts, and usually my notes are meant to help me record the open to the podcast, but I gotta tell you, I didn't understand my own notes. So this is Jacqueline. She's got a kid with type 1 diabetes. I think they had a problem at school. We end up talking about people's responsibilities at their job a lot. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. Also, try to ignore the fact, while you're listening to me rant about people not doing their jobs, that I did not do my job by leaving myself an audio note that was clear enough for me to make the beginning of this episode. Just let that irony go past you. Actually, if you need to be distracted, go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox to cleanse your palate. Get there and take the survey. Finishing the survey helps type 1 diabetes research. It supports the show. It helps people with type 1. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Your mental sorbet before beginning the podcast. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Omnipod. Of course, Omnipod makes the Omnipod 5, which is an automated tubeless insulin pump, and they make the Omnipod DASH, which is not automated, but still a tubeless insulin pump. You'll figure it all out at omnipod.com/juicebox. My daughter has been wearing an Omnipod every day for over 14 years. It's been a friend in this journey. I think you'll enjoy it. omnipod.com/juicebox. When you support the sponsors by clicking on my links or typing them in a browser, you are helping to keep this podcast plentiful and free. You're also helping to support the private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast Type 1 Diabetes. I mean, technically, you're paying my bills, and then I do all the stuff, and then you get it for free. You understand how commerce works, I imagine. Juiceboxpodcast.com, all the links to all the sponsors. If you need a Gvoke HypoPen, you need a Contour Next Gen blood glucose meter, a Dexcom, an Omnipod, what else? You want to check out Touched by Type 1. You want to get yourself some AG1 from Athletic Greens, or you want some quality bedding from Cozy Earth. These are things you'll find at juiceboxpodcast.com. There are also links in the show notes of the audio app you're listening in right now. What'd I forget? Hold on a second. You're like, just start the podcast, Scott. What are you doing? I'm doing business. Omnipod, Dexcom, Contour, Gvoke, AG1, the T1D Exchange, US Med. That's what I forgot. US Med's where my daughter gets her diabetes supplies from. Touched by Type 1, Cozy Earth. I think we've got, I can't say that one yet, but I think we got a new one coming. T1D Exchange. Did I say that? I said it. That's it. Oh, BetterHelp. BetterHelp.com/juicebox. Save 10% on your first month of therapy. I think we all need therapy. BetterHelp.com/juicebox. All right, guys, that's it. I appreciate you listening to this stuff. I mean, being completely honest and serious, the podcast doesn't exist without the sponsors, and the sponsors don't come back without you. It's a circle of life kind of thing. If you need one of these things, please click on my links. I'm not saying go buy something you don't want. I'm not saying to go buy something you don't need. I'm not saying to go buy something you can't afford. I'm saying if you're getting therapy, if you need a HypoPen, if you want a Dexcom, etc. and so on, click the links.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline, and I have a daughter living with type 1 diabetes.
Jacqueline, why do I hear people talking behind you, Jacqueline? What's going on?
My daughter actually is online learning right now. She's doing digital school.
Oh.
I could close the door, but I don't know if that would make the echo worse.
Well, let's find out. Because we definitely can't have a disembodied voice behind us while we're talking.
Okay, hold on. She must have just made it louder because I couldn't hear it before, and now I can.
No, It's okay. You were like, hey, I'm Jacqueline. I have a daughter living with type 1 diabetes. And then I felt like I was picking up half of a CB channel behind me. So we don't want that. Okay, so how...
That's just what my house always sounds like.
Like CB radio?
Yeah.
Do you think people even know what that is?
I had a nightmare about a CB radio 2 nights ago, actually.
Go on.
Involving one Oh God, it's so disturbing. I was so upset. I I had a dream that I have a friend who has a daughter that's my daughter's age that hang out, and I dreamt me and my friend were like on this road trip. We were going somewhere and we were letting our little girls go for walks out on their own. And we were like watching them from a distance, and then like we check in on them, and then we're just letting them walk around in the woods like idiots. And then like it gets dark and I realize I don't know where they are. And I have this giant CB radio and I'm like calling out on the radio, like, has anybody seen these little girls? And then this crazy, like the creepiest, deepest voice you've ever heard comes back on the radio and indicates that like he has them. I'm thinking, but it was like cracked up, like you couldn't tell what he was saying. And then I was like begging him to get them back to us. And he's like, they're fine. They've already had their milk and cookies. And then I woke up and I was like so sick, like, and upset. And it's because this ice cream from the night before was called milk and cookies, I think.
Wait, you had ice cream the evening before called milk and cookies?
Yes.
Listen. Oh my God. So had I not like arbitrarily said CB radio, which is a very bizarre thing to say, then we would not have heard about your dream.
Maybe not. Yeah.
No, I don't see how
it really like messed me up. I was really messed up.
Did you wake up sort of like shook?
Yeah, well, it was kind of one of those things where this was like, I woke up at like, it wasn't even midnight yet. Like I hadn't even been asleep that long. And you're kind of in that headspace where you don't even really realize what's real and what's not. And if you're sleeping, so, you wake up and you're like, oh my God, is my kid like abducted? And that like my child was abducted like this in the pit of my stomach. And it was not good. And then I woke up and I'm like, oh, it's just type 1 diabetes. It's not so bad.
Is that what woke you up?
At least I have her. The dream woke me up, yeah. But yeah. I think because I was just physically so ill over it.
That's crazy. Well,
yeah.
We were just talking about dreams last night. My son comes up to me and he goes, in your dreams, can you hear people when they're talking? And I was like, what? And he goes, and so at first I thought, well, yeah, I can hear people's conversations in my dreams, right? I don't really recall them, but I hear them. I know that I'm aware of them when I'm dreaming. And then he goes, no. He goes, do you actually hear them? Or do you just know that what they're saying to each other? And I was like, oh, wow, this is like a Matrix question. Like, are you hearing sounds in your head? No. Yes. You say yes, but I don't think so.
Because that voice was so distinctive. Like I heard that voice, that creepy voice over the CB radio. Like I could tell you exactly what it sounds like.
Right. But I think what my son is saying is, does your brain just create that impulse that makes you feel like you heard it? Because if you and I stopped right now, if we all stop right now, here, we'll do it all together. Everybody's listening. If we get very quiet and try to picture someone who we know's voice, you can hear it in your head, but that doesn't mean you're hearing sound.
Not physical sound.
Right. So he's talking to me like this, and I'm like, I'm feeling like I'm having a conversation and we're all high. Because he's like, can you really hear it? And I'm like, no. And he goes, and plus dreams move very quickly. He goes, maybe you just infer that you know what's happening. Like you're seeing the images, quote unquote, but he's like, how would you hear it? It's moving so fast. And so I was just like, oh my God, you're flipping me out.
How old is your son? He sounds like my son.
He's 22. Somebody said it downstairs and it caught his attention. I was upstairs working and I think he had a half an hour conversation with my wife about it before he walked up and asked me. So anyway, at some point during this podcast, if it gets weird or quiet for just 1 second, I'm going to lean into the microphone and go, Jacqueline, I have the girls.
That's pretty close, actually.
Don't worry, they've had their milk and cookies.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's really creepy.
It's so disturbing.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, okay. So how old you? How many kids do you have in total?
I have 2 biological children, and then I have 2 bonus stepsons that are older now. Okay. So my stepsons are 18 and 20. And then my daughter is 10 and my son is 12.
Okay. All right. So a couple of interesting questions here. Do your stepsons have any autoimmune issues?
No.
Okay.
They're not related. So we're just kind of like the Brady Bunch.
Are they not related to the man you're married to?
Yeah, they are. But my 2 children are from a previous marriage.
Oh, hold on a second. All right. So when you woke up from your dream last night, there was a guy laying next to you. Those boys are his. Your kids are not his. So your kids are his stepchildren.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
I got it.
Like the Brady Bunch.
Yeah. Except with fewer people and creepy dreams. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So you have a 10 and a 12-year-old. Your 10-year-old has type 1.
Yes.
Is a girl? I'm sorry.
Yes.
All right. How about the 12-year-old, girl or boy?
He's a boy and healthy as can be.
Okay.
And nobody in my family or their dad's family has any history of any autoimmune.
Nothing.
Whatsoever.
Celiac?
No.
Nothing at all. Okay.
Nothing.
All right.
Nothing.
Okay.
She did this was a COVID thing.
Yeah. So this is super interesting because I watch these conversations evolve online constantly. And I can never tell because it's online writing if it's just people's they're not being specific when they're communicating in writing, or if they really feel this way. Because you'll hear people say, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes after I had COVID. And you'll hear people say, COVID gave me type 1 diabetes. And I don't know what they mean when they say that. So how do you feel about it when you think about it?
So what happened with both of my kids got COVID after being at school for 2 weeks, last August. So they both had a fever, and then Belle had like a super light cough for a couple of weeks. Lincoln, nothing. I mean, they really had like hardly any symptoms at all. Mm-hmm. And just to preface this, my kids have never had an ear infection. They used to get perfect attendance. Like my kids are like, I'm a nutrition freak. Like they are no history of any issues whatsoever. Right. And I thought my kids could handle it because every news source told me the kids can handle this. Right. Yeah. And so it was exactly 2 weeks. It was the day she was supposed to go back to school after she was, quarantined at home. The night before she started vomiting, and I thought it was something she ate. I didn't link it to anything else. I'm like, oh, she must have had, because she was at her dad's house, so they eat a little different, which is fine. But I was like,
Jacqueline, it doesn't sound fine. In case you're wondering,
not exactly the way I would do it, but I appreciate everything they do.
And that's why he lives by himself now.
No, he's actually remarried as well, and she's fantastic. She's been really fantastic. Anyway, so she had dinner over there. Actually, she started to get sick over there the night before she was supposed to go back to school. Mm-hmm. And when she started to get sick, I was like, I'll just come get her because I'm her mom and she needs to be with me when she's not feeling good. I'm not biased at all, by the way. Yeah. So I bring her home and she just is vomiting like all through the night. And on hour like 4 or 5, I'm Googling like, when do you take your kid to the ER? How much? Because am I overreacting? It's probably just a food poisoning or a bug or something. And then I noticed she was breathing kind of heavy. And then I'm like, okay, if your breathing is off, like to me, that's emergency room. Mm-hmm. Like if you can't breathe or you're like, she just had very labored breathing. And so took her in, she like had trouble walking from the car to the ER. And I'm like, come on, what's wrong with you? Like, just walk. And I had no idea what was going on. I thought she was just being dramatic because she has a history of dramatics. And we got in there and, oh my God, thank God for this children's hospital. They were just amazing. They pricked her finger immediately. They said they smelled it on her. And, immediately they said, oh, it looks like onset. And I'm like, I have no idea what that means. Like onset what? Like what the hell is everybody talking about? Right. And so, the whole thing happens and this was obviously during COVID. So there was no breaks from it. I couldn't leave the room to cry or to freak out. I was in front of her like the whole time, which was interesting.
Yeah.
But anyway, like in talking to the nurses and doctors, the nurses had said, yeah, we're seeing a ton of these lately. And so while I was stuck in that ICU, we were in the ICU for 3 days. The last day was education, but I read the entire internet. So I'm a reader, and I found you. I was posting on Facebook, and I had a Facebook friend that recommended the podcast. So I was super lucky to find the Juicebox podcast and the Facebook group. Oh my gosh, it's everything to me. But I read the whole internet. I went to the American Diabetes Association. I watched the president of the Diabetes Association talk, give updates. And in one of the speeches that he was talking in, he was talking about how DKAs doubled in 2020.
Right.
So I also have an acquaintance of mine that got pancreatitis from COVID, and I read a ton about the link. And so COVID actually directly attacks the pancreas. That's scientific knowledge that's what it does. The question is, and I don't really know for sure exactly, how this happened. If
Oh, Jacqueline, you just disappeared again.
Attacked.
Jacqueline, hold on a second for me. That time, that time, it definitely wasn't my fault. So
what is going on?
I don't know. It could.
I teach on this computer for a living. I never have audio problems.
Hold on 1 second. I'm going to try something. So
okay.
We're going to try something together. Hold on. If you're a longtime podcast listener and you didn't know that the ad was coming here, shame on you. For the rest of you, let's get us an Omnipod, shall we? Omnipod DASH or I guess you can't get both. Omnipod DASH or Omnipod 5. I'm going to go to my link, omnipod.com / it's a slash that kind of leads to the right. Juicebox, you know how to use the internet. Okay, oh, look at this. Juicebox Podcast listeners, simplify life with Omnipod. I'll accept your cookies, Omnipod. How Omnipod simplifies life for the Juicebox Podcast host. Oh, it's about my daughter. I wrote that, so I don't have to read it to you. I know what it says. Omnipod 5 is here. It's the first tubeless automated insulin delivery system. Omnipod 5, baby. Integrated with the Dexcom G6. Available for people with type 1 diabetes. Ages 2 and up. It's got Smart Adjust technology. Smart Adjust technology? What the heck is that? I don't know. I'm not a computer. But I do know this. It gives you insulin. It takes insulin away when it thinks you need it or you don't need it. It's automated. Come on. Get in the game. Omnipod 5. Let's do it. You don't want Omnipod 5? I'm not judging you. Get an Omnipod DASH. You still get all the great stuff that comes with Omnipod. It's tubeless. You can jump in the shower. You can jump in a lake. That's got a weird connotation, jump in a lake, right? Go jump in a lake is a bad thing. You could jump in a pool. You could take a shower and not have to take off your stuff and then not have the opportunity to forget to put it back on. And then an hour later go, why's my blood sugar so high? That might happen to you if you have a tubed pump, but that is not going to happen with the Omnipod. Why not? You don't have to take it off to jump in the shower or the bathtub. How about exercise? Nope, can leave it on there too. Still make your adjustments. Let that automation run on Omnipod 5 while you're playing your soccer, lifting your weights, or doing the things you do. Even late at night, you know what I'm saying, older people? Of course, no tubing to get caught on, let's say, doorknobs. But we know what we're saying. We're not saying doorknobs. We're saying... Okay. Sorry. I'm going to have to bleep that out. Omnipod.com / Juicebox. Seriously, my daughter's been wearing an Omnipod since she was 4 years old. She's almost 19. It is an absolute friend on this journey with diabetes. If you're using insulin, my goodness, you could use an Omnipod. All right, are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay, so I made an adjustment here, and we're going to see if that helps. So I apologize because it took me by surprise. And so what you said was, I'll recap.
Okay.
You watched a video from the ADA
Right.
He said that DKA was up significantly. You had a friend.
Doubled.
You had a friend.
Doubled.
Okay, you had a friend who had pancreatitis
Right.
after COVID, and
Right.
you're saying that COVID goes like towards the pancreas, which is not something I know about. So
Yeah. So
that's where we were.
there's a study on Harvard Medical, and there's some other studies out there that talk about how COVID attacks the pancreas. It doesn't talk about how COVID attacks beta cells, but COVID attacks the pancreas 1,000%. So my question is, and the question that hangs out there in the universe, if COVID is attacking the pancreas, if your body is under attack, will your body make antibodies to go towards that place? Because not only do the COVID cells attack the pancreas, but they replicate the pancreatic cells and infiltrate as well. So if that is the part of your body that's causing the problem, can your body create those type 1 antibodies to fight it? I don't know. Nobody knows. There's not enough research.
Yeah. So I Googled while you were talking and came up with a couple of things, right? So this is from Medscape. It says SARS-CoV-2 infection has also been shown to affect the exocrine pancreas, manifesting as pancreatitis in 5% of critically ill patients with COVID-19, as well as enlargements of the pancreas and abnormal levels of lipase and amylase in 7.5% to 17% of patients. Now that's data from pretty recently, May 2022. Another one says, what are the most common organs affected by COVID-19? Lungs are the main organ affected. However, the virus can also affect others, but then it says such as kidneys, brain, and liver. It doesn't mention the pancreas. So for me, knowing nothing and everyone keeping in mind that I slept through a lot of my high school education and did not go to college, my expectation is that for your daughter had antibodies that made it more likely for her to get type 1 diabetes, and that a virus kicks that process in. So my daughter had Coxsackie virus and then got type 1 diabetes.
Right.
And
go ahead. Yeah. And I think, and I'm not saying I know for sure that COVID caused this, but when you look at the statistics for what's happening, either there was just a crap ton of people that were predisposed, that it's triggered like crazy, or maybe it could be creating antibodies in some people that weren't predisposed. So that's my question.
Yeah. It's a valuable question to ask, obviously. My expectation is that the first thing you said is what happened. So think of it this way. My daughter was 2 when she was diagnosed. If I just don't go somewhere with her one day where she gets Coxsackie, maybe she's not diagnosed till she's 6, right? And it's like, because at some point you have to get a virus that has the right mixture, who cares what it is, that will kick you into your type 1. But my daughter always had those antibodies. Like Coxsackie virus didn't magically make antibodies for type 1 diabetes appear in her. So so my point is that I think that the population usually doesn't all get sick at once with a virus. And I think it kind of needs to be a virus, like from what I've, called together talking to people all this time. So I think we just laid a blanket of virus across the world, and what grew from that is people with type 1 diabetes showed their head. They're like, oh, look, I have type 1 now. That's how I think of it. I could be 1,000,000% wrong, but that's how it occurs to me.
Yeah. And I think there's a good chance that you're right too. And I just don't know. And I hate not knowing things.
Well, you're in an interesting place, aren't you? Because in the beginning of diagnosis, a lot of people torture themselves with this question.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I tortured myself like crazy. And the guilt for even sending my kids back to school because they stayed home the year before, and then, me and my husband got vaccinated, and we thought the kids would be more resilient. And I'm like, I just should have just waited for the vaccine to come out, and maybe she would, have another 10 years without it, or another however long, and then on the other side of the coin, I'm like, God, I wasted her last year of being healthy sitting in the house.
Oh, Jacqueline, You have many psychological issues stemming from this.
I have a lot.
Yeah. Oh, good.
I
Fun.
overthink it.
Fun for us here on the podcast. Bad for you at home. Yeah. So I was talking to somebody the other day, and they had this problem, and I was like, oh, this poor person. And then the rest of me was like, this is great for the show.
And logically, I know, and people tell me, and I know, like, it's not my fault. It just feels like parenting through COVID and now through type 1 diabetes. I feel like every decision I make, I regret or is wrong, or I can't. Like, there is no right decision. And even if you would have made a different decision, that could have ended terribly. That could have ended the wrong way, you know?
And I'll tell you what, too. Imagine this. Imagine you get her a vaccine, and she goes back to school and she gets COVID, and she ends up with type 1 diabetes. You would have been like, that vaccine.
Oh, and there's a lot of people out there that claim that the vaccine gave their kid COVID or XYZ too. And, you know, and I'm like, oh, those people are crazy, but I'm just as crazy.
Not me.
Not me.
Well,
you really can't win. You really can't.
Yeah. What it brings up is the uncertainty of being alive. And what happens when you get put in charge of another human being's life and you love them, right? You know, so now you feel like I have to listen, I'm no expert, but my kid's 22 and I thought we did pretty well. And then there are times where something pops up and you're like, he's like, this is completely botched from my childhood. And you're like, really? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Did
she say that? Did she say that to you?
No, my son. My son's older.
Your son.
He's like, this thing happened, and you guys should have done this. He's got hindsight. And I let him have his feelings, and they're perfectly reasonable. But you know, he wasn't 26 and trying to figure out what to do with a 1-year-old or something. You know what I mean? Like he lacks context, and you don't care about context. You care about making the exact right decision, and there's no way to do that.
I know that. Logically, my brain knows that,
right?
You know, but it's still hard to get some of those thoughts out of your head.
And you also don't have all the information ever. Like, so my wife, for example, through her work, has knowledge of the J&J COVID vaccine. Okay. So at the very time that people were like, the J&J vaccine is like, it killed a bunch of, you know what I mean? When that was all going on, right?
That's the vaccine that I got, of course.
Listen, I was supposed to get the J&J vaccine 3 days after that popped up in the news. And I was like, God, I hope they don't stop me from getting my vaccine. And then they did. And then I was like, oh, then I had to wait. And then, you know, as soon as they said it was okay again, I went and got the J&J vaccine because I was making decisions based off of what I knew. And I also had different contexts where I forget the details of this. So please don't take this next couple of sentences for details. But there were a handful of women who died after having the vaccine. But they were in a very specific medical situation, right? Or life situation. I don't remember. I'm being very honest. I don't remember. But the point is that I was not in that medical situation. So I like the idea of the J&J vaccine because it was kind of based on older technology, and I liked it. So I'm like, we're going to do this. Plus, my wife had spent a year sifting through safety data for it. Like, that's, you know, while you were all hiding in your house, my wife was trying to make sure that that vaccine was okay.
Do you want to know something interesting about that vaccine that I was reading about? Is people that took it were more likely to faint afterwards. And I hate needles so much. It's funny. You will never meet anybody that hate them. I am very needle phobic. I've always been. And so I chose the Johnson & Johnson vaccine because there's one of them. And I also can pass out if I get freaked out or, you know, or get blood drawn or something. So it's funny that that's the vaccine that people are more likely to pass out in because that's the one all the wimps take. because you only want one shot.
Well, you know, even that's an interesting statement. Like, you're more likely to pass out if you do this than this. And we hear those things as headlines, and then we're like, oh my God. Then in our minds, like, there's a room, a gymnasium full of people getting the J&J vaccine, and they're falling over like those sleeping sheep.
Yeah.
Except what it probably means is that, I don't know, 100 people out of every million passed out with this one, but with this one, it was 120.
Oh, maybe.
You know what I mean?
I just think the psychological aspect of it is interesting. Like the types of people that chose that one might be more predisposed to fainting or freaking out, than the types of people that would willingly sign up to get double the needles.
That's so interesting. Yeah, getting the shot never occurred to me as being an issue one way or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but I don't have a trouble with the needle. So, it's for anyway. Well, anyway, however it happened. No, don't be sorry. Your daughter's got diabetes now. So, and how long ago was this?
August 23rd. So her anniversary is coming up.
1 year she's coming up on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So diagnosed during COVID. How long did she stay in the hospital for?
We were in the hospital for 3 days. When they admitted her, her blood sugar was 575.
Mm-hmm.
And then her A1C was 8.4.
Can I ask you a question? The day that she was diagnosed, was how long after she had gotten COVID?
2 weeks. 14 days.
14 days. And her blood sugar was
575.
575.
Well, 14 days from her fever. Now, she could have been exposed a week before that, but 14 days from her fever.
Right. Okay. I hear you. All right, I got it. I'm trying to remember how long. I thought Arden had Coxsackie for a month or so before, even longer than she was diagnosed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, you stay in the hospital. They let you out. What do they give you when you leave?
Oh, they were so great. I had bags and bags of stuff. I had, she got her little JDRF there.
Mm-hmm.
They gave us like tons of books and material. I actually met with a dietitian at the hospital, which was nice. And they did lots of training for me at the hospital. I left with insulin pens, a glucose meter. So we had Lantus and Humalog, and then ketone strips. I mean, pretty much everything we would need.
Okay. I like how it was like you were leaving a birthday party and people were like, here, take a kazoo.
Yeah. She got this huge like blanket. They gave her all these toys. Like they were constantly like showering us with, it was this great children's hospital. And there was a social worker that came in to make sure we were okay. Like, do you need anything? She got me like a brush. And so, they were just amazing.
So you had done a lot of reading while you were in the hospital. So what was your expectation of what living with diabetes was going to be like versus what it ended up being?
Oh, at first it was so overwhelming. It was just, like I said, we're both, I hate needles. She hates needles. I mean, even now getting blood work, it's horrible. I never wanted to have anything to do with it. So at first I'm like, how the hell am I going to do this? Like, how am I going to do this all the time, multiple times a day? It's just such a shock. Like it just turns everything on its head. And it seemed so daunting and so intimidating. And like, I obviously like went through so much grief of just how our lifestyle was about to change, now a year later, it's not that big of a deal as much. It's a smaller part of life.
Yeah. Did she have a honeymoon?
Not a well-defined one. I don't really understand the honeymoon thing.
Okay.
Because it's, I don't know. And she's 10. So she's got like hormonal stuff is starting.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to tell. Like we need to make adjustments sometimes, but she never got to a point where like she didn't need insulin. or anything like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you don't understand the honeymoon, then you didn't see it.
Yeah, probably not.
Right. But that's even interesting that she had a short or non-existent honeymoon. So her needs haven't changed significantly in any leaps.
Not really.
Interesting.
Not really.
I like how you said she has hormone stuff going on.
You know that thing when you think you have it all figured out, and then you're like, oh, I got a couple days here where we're doing good, and then all of a sudden
it changes.
She needs half the insulin or twice the insulin. You're like, what the hell's going on?
Right. No, I know. Okay, so how did she handle it? Like, I guess just kind of psychologically and like as a person.
At first, really, really well. At first, it was she started giving herself shots actually fairly quickly. She preferred that. Mm-hmm. She got a lot of attention in the beginning, and she really liked that. And she didn't mind the candy either. So at first, it was good. It took a little while for things to kind of soak in. Now, she's still pretty, I don't know.
I like how you said she wanted to do the shots herself. And I'm thinking, well, of course she does, because you're probably holding the needle like, I don't want to do this. This is terrible.
I mean, I got used to it pretty quickly. I really was able to, obviously out of necessity, I compartmentalize and I detach myself from feeling anything at all and just do it. Just go into like robot mode. But now it's complicated. There's a lot of layers there. There's a lot of things we were working on. I started taking her to a horse therapist, which is not a horse talking to her, but is a therapist that uses horses. My husband says every time I say horse therapist, he thinks of like her talking to a horse.
It's funny. I thought opposite. I thought, oh, these poor people can't afford a therapist for a person. That's terrible.
Exactly.
No, I knew what you meant.
What's funny is the reason she's going to equine therapy is because I couldn't find a normal one. I was looking everywhere and she was asking for help, and she, obviously has a lot that she's dealing with and isn't great or comfortable with expressing herself. Like she keeps a lot on the inside. That's, and she's always been that way. So, I searched forever. I contacted the hospital. I contacted everybody, and nobody had any resources that would take our insurance, that would talk to somebody her age. And then finally, I was just at this leadership thing, and one of the people that I was going with, she's like, well, I do equine therapy, and I have an opening, and she takes insurance. I'm like, oh my gosh. So it worked out.
How does this work? Does she just sort of care for the horse and ride it and that kind of thing?
She hasn't actually ridden the horse, but she will like groom it. So she brushes it and does like breathing. And then the horse is very in tune to feelings. And so, if you put your hand on a horse and you think happy thoughts, and you put out your hand on a horse and you think angry thoughts, the horse reacts differently to your mood. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of getting in touch with your own feelings through getting in touch with the horse's feelings, and the horse expresses how it feels with different body language and the things that the horse does. And so she's teaching my daughter, see how he does this with his head, or how that means he's feeling this way, or we don't want to make him feel nervous. So it's a lot with it helps with like anxiety, but also just kind of identifying what are your feelings and how to kind of be a little bit more in control of them and identifying them.
That seems like either very worthwhile or someone is tricking you into paying them to brush their horse. One or the other.
Well, I mean, it's insurance, so it's fine.
I imagine the person right now, they're like, this is amazing. So these people give me $40 and then they brush my horse for me. And I tell them,
I know, right?
And I tell them I know what it means when the horse looks down to the right.
I need to start advertising like vacuum therapy services.
Oh my God, Jacqueline. I've been thinking the same thing while you're talking. I was like, I wonder if people would feel better pressure washing my siding.
I know that crossed my mind too. It's pretty funny.
But listen, if it's helping her, it kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, she really likes it. It just sucks because it's hot. We're in Arizona, so over the summer, we can't do the horse stuff over the summer because it's triple digit temperatures. So we have to wait until late September to get back into it, probably,
right,
or October.
Yeah, you live somewhere where people aren't supposed to be. Yeah, because the temperatures.
It's gorgeous, but we do need either water or air conditioning. We need to be in the pool or in the house.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. I was just talking with somebody the other day from Canada, and they were talking about how cold it gets, and I was like, "Move! Like, why are you there?" And now you're telling me triple digits, and I'm like, I don't care how nice it is at the other times of year. You gotta get the hell out of there.
Well, I don't know if you could see my Facebook profile, but you could. I actually went for a walk at sunrise this morning around the lake, the park by my house, and I wake up at 5 a.m. and take pictures of the sunrise, and it's everything. It's
How hot totally is it at 5 o'clock?
It was about 82.
Oh, okay.
This morning at 5 a.m. So it's not too bad right now because it's monsoon season. So we're getting like rains and stuff.
I like when people from different places say things that they think sound normal. Like it's triple digits hot and it's monsoon season. And you're like, because it's monsoon season. I'm like, oh yeah, sure.
It's just basically when we're pelted with, like, these monsoons are crazy. We had 2 trees ripped out of our front yard that were like 10 years old a couple weeks ago.
See, you're explaining a scenario where I would run.
I love it here.
I'd be like, I got to go somewhere else where there's no monsoon season, if at all possible.
Well, I visited my friend in California a couple weekends ago, and she gave me a hard time because I had to wear a jacket to the beach. Because I was like chilly. And I'm like, I couldn't live anywhere else because if it's anywhere around 70 or below, forget it. Like I'm freezing. I can't handle it.
I've only been to Arizona once. I was in and out very quickly. But it was nice, but I was there at a reasonable time of year. Although, now that I'm thinking of it, when I landed, we had to take alternate routes to where I was going because some of the streets were flooded.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it doesn't handle rainwater well either, right?
Not too great. Yeah. So historically, there is a history of flooding. I would say we haven't had anything too horrible,
right,
in recent history. But
gotcha. Well, listen.
But the town I live in has like walls built to just in case.
You're painting a photo for people. No one's going to move to Arizona after hearing you describe it. So,
hopefully. We're like one of the fastest growing places in the country. So that's fine if people stop moving here.
That's
fine.
Only because of the equine therapy industry that is just taking off. Yeah. Oh, wow. Fire trucks.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on. That doesn't happen very often around here. Can you hear that?
No,
my microphone is so good. It takes my voice in, but blocks everything else out. Okay, so she's struggling a little bit. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yes.
How does that present itself? Like, what side of that do you see? Like, I know you said she holds things inside. She needs help. She's having trouble expressing herself. But what does it look like to you from the outside? The struggle.
Getting just reactions that don't match the situation sometimes, or being upset and not knowing why. Crying and not knowing why sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So, and not wanting to do things that she previously wanted to do. She gives up very easily. We tried doing school last year in person with diabetes. That was a nightmare. It was a really hostile situation with the administration at that school. So I didn't want to deal with them again, but I left it up to my daughter. Mm-hmm. I would do it for her if that's what she needed, but, she hated, they pulled her out of school 6, 7, 8 times a day sometimes to check her blood sugar and just refused to use Dexcom to follow her at all. Like, I was so excited when we got the technology. I'm like, oh, she could be in class, least restrictive environment. And they're just like, which is funny because the school really touts like technology. But they're, oh no, it's going to make us liable, whatever. So instead of just looking at a screen to see her numbers, they wanted to bring her into the nurse's office, before and after every meal, before and after PE and recess, beginning of the day, end of the day. And, and before and after so everything.
They were finger sticking her like 9 times a day when she was wearing a CGM?
No, they wanted her to physically leave the classroom and go report to the nurse what her CGM said.
Why does that matter? I don't understand. Like,
yeah.
Instead of the nurse having access to it?
Yeah, and we donated $400 to the school so they could get a tablet, and they happily took my money knowing exactly what it was for and then refused to buy one.
Oh. Are they playing
and when
Angry
I went
Birds
in to
on it, you
ask
think?
questions,
Yeah.
I went in to ask questions, and I talked to the principal for the first time, and I'd never talked to this person, never really met the principal, except for maybe like in the beginning when we had the meeting, but I had never like had a one-on-one conversation with her. And I went in there to like ask for her help, right? I know how to deal with people. I was in customer service forever. Like I'm not like some crazy person, right? And she's like, oh, we could talk about this in my office. And I was like, oh, great. I can sit down and talk to her. I was so excited to talk to her. We sit down and she goes, well, first of all, you need to calm down. And that was the first thing she said to me. And I'm like, oh, and she was like talking down to me like an angry teacher, like a bad teacher would talk to a student. And she's like, every time you come in here, you have an attitude. She said that to me. And I have no,
and you had never spoken to her before?
I've never spoken to her before. I felt like I was being nice to everybody. I felt I was doing the best I could. I never said a negative thing to her about anybody. Mm-hmm. And I brought in baked goods when they asked me to. And I brought, gifts at Christmas time. And I'm like, and I thought I know I'm not like, maybe I'm just not a likable person. Like, but basically she was Jacqueline. Telling me, this woman was telling me like, she doesn't like me, and I'm sitting there asking for help for my kid. And she's like, we're doing everything we need to do. And we're not legally obligated to do this or that. And, we're doing what we need to do to keep your daughter safe. And she was so hostile. I started shaking and I started crying and I left. And
Jacqueline, I would have taken $400 worth of office supplies out of her office when I left.
She followed me into the front office from her office and kept going at me. And I don't remember what she said because my ears were ringing. And I turned around and I yelled at her and I said, stop talking. You don't know how to talk to people. I yelled that at her. Right. And then I got in my car and I was like a mess. Yeah. I couldn't drive because I was shaking and crying so hard. I was just there to ask for help. Right. And I was so viciously attacked. And I went online, tried to find somebody that this woman was accountable to. It was a public charter school, so they're not part of a district. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't find anybody. To reach out to for help. And I almost pulled my kids out of school that day. Right. But I'm like, okay, get your head straight, calm down, cool off. And I did. I calmed down. I cooled off. I sent her an email the next day saying like, these are the things you said that made me feel this way. Mm-hmm. And I would recommend maybe not using this verbiage with other parents in the future. Right. I put it all in writing and she came back and she emailed me back and apologized if that's how I felt. And she said, I have a history of going in there and questioning what they're doing. And criticizing them, she said, which I didn't feel like was the case at all. So, but I'm sorry for asking questions. This is all, I'm just trying to help my kid too,
Yeah. So not knowing you for more than 45 minutes, I I'm thinking that she didn't like being challenged, and they didn't want to expand what they do, because then it opens them up to liability, and it opens them up to having to provide those services for other people in the future. So
and the funny thing is when Belle would, and she, your first year, you're going to be all over the place. And maybe you're all over the place all the time. I don't know. But there were times where she was really high, and there were times where she dropped fast. Mm-hmm. And the times that she dropped fast were not the times the nurse had her check in. So
right,
having that extra security, to me, is less liability. To me, if you tell me, no, I'm not going to monitor your daughter, and then my daughter has a seizure because you're not monitoring her,
right,
that's when I'm going to get a lawyer. That's when I'm going to sue you for not doing what I told you needs to be done to monitor her.
Yeah.
So how is it more liability to have that information?
The way it's more liability, if you look at it just from their side, is that saying that you'll do it infers that you'll stop the problem from happening in their mind, instead of just saying, like, we'll do our best to monitor this. If, by the way, my phone is silenced, then I don't get an alarm or something, or I walk away from my tablet and I don't hear that. That's what they're worried about, is that your kid has a problem, and then you say, well, we gave you the tablet, you were monitoring it. How did you let this happen? This is your fault. Like, so it's liability. It's like everybody trying to stay. It
seems so common sense that, I understand that there's going to be human error. There's human error when she's with me. I'm monitoring it at home as well.
Right.
But if an extra set of eyes sure would have been nice. But,
it's all common sense right up until somebody can sue somebody, and then everybody hides in a corner and covers their ass.
Well, I hope that they get sued for not having it.
I don't think they're going to.
To me, like declining the technology that would help you to keep a child safer is putting that child in more danger.
Yeah, but that's a coin flip at schools, whether or not somebody's going to want to follow or not.
I know.
Yeah. It's
which is why we're learning online this year, because I can't fight. I don't want to fight anymore, and I'm and she chose it too. She was tired of it too. I'm hoping by the time she gets to middle school that she will be self-sufficient enough to not need help at all from the nurse.
Are there not other school options for you, or will she at middle school be in a different system by then?
So I could put her in another elementary school. It's funny, I was thinking about putting her in this one that was supposed to have this great nurse, and then the nurse quit right beforehand. And it's just, the turnover right now is through the roof, and the staffing right now is really bad. So I feel like even if I did find the perfect situation, there's no guarantees that person would even stay there.
Yeah. Do you work full time?
No, I work part-time. I teach online.
Okay. Is there a world where but you were watching though, right? While she was at school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was managing from home, and I was going in there like maybe once a week, and it was stressful because she has a T-Slim now as well. And she doesn't always respond to her alarms. And so I was having to call the school and just trying to do everything from home. It was just a lot. It was a lot. Yeah.
So, because what I was thinking was, wouldn't it have been possible for just like, we'll take these check-in times that the nurse wants, and you'll check at those times.
Well, and that's what I did towards the end of the school year. Because it was getting so out of hand, she was missing so much class. Mm-hmm. I got with my endo team, and we got a new health plan together that says she is never to go to the nurse unless if she's below 60, or if she doesn't feel good or she wants to go to the nurse.
Right.
So we essentially kind of fired the nurse. And that's when I started doing everything 100% from home, which again, it's like, it was still a lot. And she's still, she was very self-conscious about her pump beeping. So sometimes she would turn those off. Mm-hmm. Or if she's in the middle of a project or in the middle of doing something, she doesn't want to deal with it, I have to call the front office. They have to go get her.
How often was that happening?
Maybe once or twice a week.
And the school doesn't have phones? You had to call the front office and they had to go get her? They couldn't just call the room and say, hey, send Belle to the nurse?
Well, I would try calling her cell phone, and sometimes she wouldn't answer. And the worst was when she was at recess. Mm-hmm. I tried to get the teacher to hold on to the phone, but she didn't understand, like, how to answer it or whatever. Like, oh, gosh.
Again, you do not work for the Arizona Travel Council or whatever. I'm not.
I love Arizona, but our education system is very, very tough. And in Arizona, even teachers at charter schools don't even need to have degrees or certificates. So, and I went to school for education, and I'm telling you, a lot of the teachers with degrees even.
Yeah.
So
well, listen, let me tell you something. My mom is in a place where she lives in a place where they're monitoring her care. Okay.
Yeah.
And 2 days ago, I'm talking to her and I'm like, how's everything going, Mom? And she's like, my blood pressure's high. And I was like, okay. So it was high enough to be concerning. It had been high for a couple of days. I said, what are they doing? She said, well, they gave me more blood pressure medication. And I was like, okay, has the doctor seen you? No. They just gave me more blood pressure medication. I said, is that working? She said, no. I was like, okay. So I called the nurse and I say, hi, my mom's blood pressure has been very high for 4 days. She's 80 years old. What are we doing? Well, they gave her more medicine. I said, is that working? And she goes, no, it doesn't seem to be. And I said, okay. I said, okay, so what are we going to do now? She goes, well, we'd like to wait a little longer. I said, well, why don't we talk to a doctor? And so I said, I think maybe we'd want to speak to her physician who's making the decisions about the medication. Can you talk to the doctor for me? She goes, sure. And I said, when can I call back to see what the doctor said? She goes, call back in 24 hours. I was like, okay. That's me saying, I know you're not going to call the doctor.
Right.
So I call back in 24 hours. I get her back on the phone and I say, hey, what did the doctor say about my mom's blood pressure? Oh, I usually bump into him during the day, but I just haven't seen him today, so I haven't spoken to him yet. I was like, oh, okay. Well, it's been 24 hours. Can you go speak to him now? She goes, sure, I'll call you right back. I was like, great. I'll wait for your call. So she calls back and says the doctor upped her blood pressure medication again. And I was like,
oh, my God.
I said, is that it? And she goes, uh-huh. And I was like, what kind of doctor is he? And she goes, he's a GP. I said, so he's a general practitioner. I was like, right. I said, what did the cardiologist say about this? And she starts flipping through. She goes, well, your mom's never seen a cardiologist for this.
Oh, my God.
And I go, don't you think that'd be a good idea? She has a pacemaker. She's 80 years old. She just went through chemotherapy. Her blood pressure's up. It's high. It's consistently high. Don't you think? And then the woman started covering her ass. The nurse. I was listening to her cover her ass while we were talking. You should probably talk to her doctor. Because I don't know the answers to these questions. I'm like, sure you do. You see her 5 times a day. You take her blood pressure every time. You do know. So she doesn't take her blood pressure and see a problem and go, oh, I have to help Bev. She says, I have to document this because that's what keeps me out of trouble. And then I told the doctor, now it's his problem. And so I said, well, we're letting a GP make decisions about this. It doesn't make sense. She goes, well, I don't know. I'm not aware of his complete training. I said, you think he's a GP and he's privately a cardiologist and keeping that a secret from everybody? And she's like, well, I don't know. You'll have to call him. So I call him. I say, hey,
oh my gosh.
I hear about my mom, blah, blah, blah. What are we doing? He goes, well, I doubled her blood pressure medication. I said, is that working? And he goes, no. And I said, well, she's on a medication for pain. I said, a tiny bit of Googling tells me that could cause high blood pressure. Well, she's been taking that for a while, so that wouldn't be it. I said, are you sure? Why don't you try cutting it back and see what happens? Because if you just take a pill from her for a day and see if maybe her blood pressure goes down, why don't we try a little bit? Well, I don't think that's it. I was like, yeah, but why don't we try it anyway? And he goes, okay, I'll look at that. And I'm like, all right. And I said, and what about her seeing a cardiologist? And he goes, yeah, she hasn't seen a cardiologist for this. And I went, do you think she should? And he goes, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll set that up. Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll set that up.
Well, at least he didn't fight you on it.
Jacqueline, it's because I'm like where you sat in the office. You're like, she's yelling at me. I was like, and you kind of curled up. That's when I blossom. I'm at like, you guys know me like 47%. You know what I mean? Like, I love being in fights. Like, this is the best thing that ever happened to me.
You know, and normally I'm great at confrontation. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was just the subject matter of it, you know, and it being about this and just just how overwhelmed and taken off guard and it back. Like I've never been treated that way by anybody that's worked anywhere. And to have the principal of your child's school treat you that way, I mean, I was in just such a state of shock.
Yeah, I'm still pissed that we don't haggle over car prices anymore when we're buying cars. It was one of my favorite things to do, like every 5 years.
Oh, that's what I used to do.
Yeah.
I was a sales manager at a Ford dealership, and I worked for Ford for 4 years, and then I was an internet manager at Nissan for 2 years, and I loved negotiating.
I love the art. It's my favorite thing.
The art, yeah, it's so fun to negotiate and haggle. And
when we were young, we left, and my wife's like, we argued for 3 hours and saved $1,000. I was like, you know, it's amazing, right? She's like, did it matter? And I was like, I don't know, I had a great time.
That's making $333 an hour.
I know.
When have you made $333 an hour?
I'm like, I'm killing it here, you know? But but think about this. No one has my mom's best interest at heart in this story except for me.
Right.
And everyone is willing to do bare bones, basic, whatever it is. One nurse said to me, I swear to you, well, your mom is older and she has heart problems. And I said, yes. She goes, heart problems don't get better. They get worse. And I went, okay. So
they can get better. They can get better.
Well, let's just say she's right. We're done. Are we done with her now? Like, are we going to, we should just push her in the dumpster? Is that this? Like, you're not going to try to do something? I was like, she just spent the last year of her life defeating cancer. And now you're going to tell me her blood pressure got higher? And I'm like, oh, well, it's over now. Like, she actually said it to me in that tone. Well, like this, this isn't going to get better. And I was like, she's probably
just so jaded.
She's the one in charge. She's my mom's frontline defender, And then I get to the doctor and think about this. If my mom seeing a cardiologist was a good idea, why did I have to call and say it? Because it was not going to happen if I didn't call. That doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
Right. So you think that principal is going to put her ass out in the sunshine for you? No way. Not in a million years. If your kid has to go learn in her bedroom for 3 years so that she keeps her job, then that's what's going to happen. That's it.
That's what's happening.
I'm sorry.
Well, 2 years.
I don't see this as being cynical, by the way. And I'm certain that there are plenty of people.
Well, and that's not the only layer to this either, is she's really struggled in math, and I didn't realize the extent of it until COVID hit, and I actually saw how she struggled in math.
Yeah.
And that's one thing she would cry about a lot last year. And when I would go to her teacher, I would get nothing. And so she needs help in math. And a lot of kids, when they're bad at math, it's like, okay, just don't get a job that has math in it. But it's like, no, you have to understand how numbers work to manage your healthcare for the rest of your life. You can't just not understand how numbers work,
Well, Jacqueline, also, not for nothing, but bailing on a 10-year-old as unhelpable around math is silly.
And that's not what happened. What happened is I would call and ask how she's doing, and the teacher would say, well, I don't know. She doesn't really raise her hand. So she doesn't know if she's struggling because she doesn't raise her hand and ask and tell her that she's struggling. And I'm like, okay, well, she's not able to do any of the homework, and she's crying that she feels like she's the stupidest one in class and everybody else gets it and she's not getting it. And I was like, I think she has a learning disability in math. And I said that repeatedly. I think she has a learning disability. Well, we don't really have any programs to do anything about that. Well, it wasn't until the end of the school year where somebody told me, no, you have to put in writing. I'm officially requesting that she get tested for a learning disability. Okay. I send them an email and in writing, but it was too close to the end of the school year. So we'll do it when school starts. I'm like,
Jacqueline, do you see that if we take that little parable that you just told me and pull out the words math and put in high blood pressure and a couple of other things, it's the exact story about me talking to the doctor about my mom. Right.
It's just complacency. And I'm sorry that, that's, I have higher expectations of people.
And my point isn't that it's specifically in healthcare or specifically in education. It's specifically in people. They're like, listen, there's a process here. I am following the process. You have not written down the words you just said to me, and I'm not legally obligated to tell you that if you write it down that we can get her help, or I don't know, or whatever. And so it's a checklist.
There's two kinds of people. There's people that go to work and they go through the motions and they collect their check. And then there's people that are passionate about what they do and take pride in their work and are there to really do the right thing and be helpful. And unfortunately, in my daughter's case, she's really been experienced to that first type of person in education.
Yeah.
In healthcare, she's been very lucky.
Right.
And I could be here telling you the opposite story. She could have fantastic, school and horrible hospital, and there's people with that too.
Right.
But in this case, we've had the complacency on the school side, and I don't even want to roll the dice to deal with that again because I've done so much. I started reading again. I know she has dyscalculia. Dyscalculia is math learning disorder. That's about as common as dyslexia, but it affects a certain part of the brain. And I listened to every podcast and I've read everything I could about it. And it explains why she didn't learn how to ride a bike until she was 9. It explains why she has trouble understanding how time works and how money works and all this other stuff, like with numbers are really difficult for her to comprehend. And so her online school is going to be testing her for dyscalculia. But again, after my research, I'm like, okay, and I'm so relieved. I'm like, oh my God, we could actually do something about this. There's actually like
something to try.
There's actually, processes we can, combinations and tools to use to help people. And there's a lot of adults that suffer from dyscalculia, but nobody knows about it. So they just feel like they're dumb, and they're not. Their brain just works differently.
Listen, if how money works is one of the signs, then I might know a lot of people. So I
laugh, but it's sad. I mean, because my daughter she's very, very bright, and she reads like a fish. She reads all the time, and she writes all the time, and she's very intelligent. But when it comes to numbers, her brain just doesn't process them
the same way
as everybody else. And with diabetes, that's scary to me, so I'm like, she needs to understand number concepts.
Yeah. I'd also like to see her have a little savings when she's older too. That'd be nice,
Well, it's not necessarily about like managing money. It's more so like calculating change and understanding amounts and things like that.
How about time? How does time fit into it?
Well, basically, especially like 2nd through 5th grade, that's when kids are learning like all these different number models. So, you count in base 10, but when you do time, you're in base 12, and then when you're talking about dollars, you're in base 100. And you're learning about all these different measurements, right? And a ruler is 12 inches, and there's 30 days in a month, and there's 12 months in a year. And just kind of getting to remember all these different base value systems is really tough.
And for some people, it just happens, and then for some people, it doesn't.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, because
it's a physical brain thing where like a certain part of their brain on one side isn't communicating. So in these people, one of the podcasts I listened to, they were saying when you give these people calculations, when they try to do calculations, the language center in their brain lights up instead of the math center. So it's super interesting. It's just like it's a different way of thinking, I guess.
Right. No, and listen, everybody's not going to think exactly the same way, but you could have the basics, and somebody could help you, especially when you're 10 years old. That just makes sense. So, Well, I'm glad she's. I don't know. Listen, you're making this sound like I can't even make fun of Canada anymore. If this is what Arizona is, do you know what I mean? Like
it's not, well, it's everywhere. And there's great schools, I'm sure.
In Arizona.
There's great schools in Arizona, and there's horrible schools in Arizona, and there's great schools everywhere and horrible schools everywhere. I'm sure, except for maybe some places don't have horrible schools because everyone there thinks education is important. But here,
I'm sorry. All right, Jacqueline, listen, let's start talking about whether or not we got to everything you wanted to talk about. So I'm going to look. You said some things in your note that have not come up at all.
Yeah.
So, wait a second. You've recently got married.
I got married in April.
Oh, okay. All right.
Mm-hmm.
That is very recently.
Yeah. And yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. That must be difficult for kids too. Like, I mean,
Well, we were already living together for a few years before that. So it wasn't really to them it was just a party. It didn't really change our lifestyle or anything.
okay, I understand. All right, that makes sense. All right. Well, then let me ask you, is there anything we haven't talked about that you wanted to talk about?
The thing we haven't talked about was the custody thing. And
How does custody work for you?
So right now it's kind of 50-50. With school being back in session, it's 50-50 for my son who's in middle school. And then for my daughter, it's she's here every day during the day, and then she's with him 3 to 4 nights a week. But my daughter's here a lot more.
How is the custody an issue with the diabetes?
So my ex is a recovering alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been doing great for a very, very long time. But it's just kind of one of those things where once you have that in you, it's like any addiction, right? There's always a chance of something happening. So when my daughter was diagnosed, my ex was already going through a lot with he had family members. He actually had a family member that went into the hospital the day before my daughter did.
No.
And he had another family member that he needed to help with because the other family member was in the hospital. So he had a lot going on. And then the thing happened with my daughter. So I was really worried for him that, that could trigger something. And then about a month after, so for me, like as a mom, like even before diabetes, there's just kind of always this like if something happens, like if his wife were to leave him, or if something were to happen to his parents, like I always worry like he could start again. And so what happened was,
how does that impact like day-to-day stuff?
Well, it wasn't, so his wife, like I said, is amazing. And she handled a lot of the diabetes stuff, especially at first when he wasn't really able to process it because he was going through a lot. But about a month after she was diagnosed, she went on vacation. Like she left for the weekend and left him home alone with the kids. And I got a phone call from the kids crying and terrified because he was very intoxicated and they didn't feel safe. And so I had to pick them up and file a police report and do all this stuff. And my son had to give my daughter her Lantus shot, which he had never done before.
Ooh, Jacqueline, you broke up.
It's not that she doesn't understand, but she could be thinking 6 and write a 9. You know what I mean?
Jacqueline, I'm sorry, you broke up again. Your son had to give your daughter Lantus and.
Yeah, and my daughter isn't, even though she likes to give herself the shot, I always want to double check that it's the right dose because sometimes she can think one number and write down another number. So she can mix up numbers very easily. Okay. And my son has never done this, and I wasn't even sure he knew how much to dose her. So that was happening. So I had to go pick them up. I was actually at my parents' house. I drove across town. I had to file a report and go back to court and get more testing done. And then he had to do some testing. So, and he did, and he went through everything and he got it back together. And his wife is like, I mean, they're doing the best that they possibly can. And I can't, and I'm grateful for that, but it's just, it was just an additional little trauma
Right.
that she endured. So she's endured some trauma.
Yeah.
So that's just it's kind of in the back of my mind. If she's not there, will he take advantage of the situation, and give in to those impulses?
I see.
So it's kind of scary.
Well, that does sound scary. Actually.
I mean, diabetes is scary, and just as a mom, and I don't know if all moms are like this, or parents are like this, but there's just a certain level of paranoia that I always have. There's a certain level of like worst case scenarioism that I always am, is wondering. So it just kind of adds to that a little bit.
I think I understand. Yeah, it's a rough situation.
Yeah.
I mean, even on your son, who all of a sudden got thrust into like, I guess I'm going to give her this shot, it sounds like they took care of it, but the circumstances make it, it's not a triumphant feeling under those circumstances.
Right.
Yeah. That sucks.
Yeah.
Well, all right, Jacqueline, listen, I don't want to say your life's a show, but it's not great.
My life, I have a great life. I have wonderful kids. I am madly in love with my husband. I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to be here with my daughter, and I don't have to keep fighting with the school while I'm at a full-time job, so I have got a lot to be grateful for.
No, for sure. No, I was teasing you. And who wouldn't tease somebody about that? I was like, it's a heavy conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is.
Because especially, I mean, listen, the alcoholism aside, if a couple of people in your life just wanted to do a slightly better job or be a little more valuable to the people around them, then most of these big problems you have just wouldn't exist. And it would take such a tiny bit of effort on their part to remove a lot from your shoulders and from your daughter and everything, and that's what's frustrating to me is that. Oh, yeah.
If she was able to go to school, I would be teaching in a classroom right now.
Right. It's just, it's
not
that
here
much
in
more
Arizona
effort.
where we have no teachers in the classroom. There's such a shortage here. Everyone's desperate for teachers. I can't be there. I can't teach in a classroom right now because my daughter has to come first. If I knew she was safe at school and they were watching her and I could trust them, then I could be teaching in a classroom.
Yeah.
But I'm not.
It just doesn't seem like it would take that much for that to happen. I guess is the,
you would think.
Yeah, it's a little bit of will. That's all. Like the will to do it. And that's most of it. I think they would find that the actual effort on their part would go down, not up. Like actual effort put out would go down. Safety would move up. Comfort. And
they had 4 type 1 diabetics in the school. So they had 4 kids doing this. So, multiply the number of nurse visits by 4. And that's how many times she had somebody coming in to interrupt her when she could have put them all 4 on the tablet and looked at the screen.
I wonder how much of it is job protection of like, well, if these kids don't come down here, then what do I do? Like, I wonder if that ever popped into anyone's head. You know what I mean?
There were actually 2 nurses, and one of the nurses was really great and open to it. And then the other nurse was oddly clinging to this more
older ideas.
And it's unnecessarily. It's like government, right? Like it's like like why do you have to make things more complicated and difficult than they have to be? Like just stop. Just make it easy on yourself.
Well, it sounds like the one
use the technology.
Yeah, it just sounds like the one nurse is stuck in the way they do it.
Yeah, and she took it. Oh gosh, I need to tell you this. She took it so personal. Mm-hmm. She took it so personal when I wasn't happy with the way they were doing it. Like she's missing too much class. I would much rather her be remotely monitored so she could stay in class if she's healthy, and she took it very personal. And after that confrontation happened with the principal, the next day she didn't let me in her office. She peeked her head out to talk to me. with the door closed around her head. And then like she was really hostile with me for the rest of the year, like so much so because my son used to meet me at the nurse's office. He goes, "Why is the nurse so mad at you?" Like she was openly like, like junior high level, like I can't stand you. I'm not gonna give you eye contact or smile in your direction. I'm gonna frown and look in a different direction. And it's so wild to me. Like I've never seen adults behave that way in any professional, any setting.
Well, there you
like,
go. You found
ever.
it. It's incredibly in the end, it's just incredibly unfortunate luck, just bad luck that those are the people you ran into.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. All right, Jacqueline, I appreciate you doing this very much with me. I really do. I hope you had a good time, even though we talked about some bummer stuff, but I thought it was a good conversation.
Yeah, it was fun.
Cool. Yeah, I'm glad. Hold on one second for me. Okay. Well, Jacqueline did her part, didn't she? That was wonderful. And you know who else chipped in? Omnipod. Omnipod.com/Juicebox. Get yourself the Omnipod 5 or the Omnipod DASH. It's up to you. You get to choose. But whatever you choose it through my link, Omnipod.com/Juicebox. I got a bounce in my voice. Oh, I'm getting on a plane tomorrow to go visit my daughter for a couple days for Parents Weekend, so I'm kind of excited. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. What else? Oh, well, I got to thank you for listening, of course. Remind you to tell other people about the podcast if you're enjoying it. I mean, if you really love it, leave a 5-star rating and a beautiful review wherever you listen. Don't forget to check out the private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. Oh, you know what else, too? Hold on. If you know some people with the Type 2 diabetes, I just put out a great series about Type 2. Can you please let them know about it? We're trying to spread the word. That's all I'm asking you to do. If you don't know where to find this information, fair enough. The private Facebook group under the featured tab will have a whole list. And I want to say, yes, here it is. You go to juiceboxpodcast.com, click on the top, Type 2 diabetes. There's a whole a menagerie there. A menagerie of information for people who have prediabetes or Type 2. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for sharing. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Hey guys, just jumping in to remind you that one of our sponsors, BetterHelp, is offering 10% off your first month of therapy when you use my link, betterhelp.com/juicebox. That's betterhelp.com/juicebox. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service. It is 100% online, boasts over 25,000 licensed and experienced therapists, and you can talk to them however you want. Text, chat, phone, or on video. You can actually message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you. BetterHelp.com/juicebox. Save 10% on your first month.